The Louie T Network is powered by MusicHead University. MusicHeads, classes in session. Turn me up. Enroll on YouTube now. Link is in the description.
Who else could it be but me, your man, Louie T? Welcome to the Command Post Live. You know what it is. Post up. Take command. I, of course, am your Commander-in-Chief, Louie T. Thank you for joining me. A couple of items to get to today. We're going to clean up all of the press conferences and interviews from yesterday's day one of phase 3 of OTAs. So we didn't talk about DQ's press conference, so we're going to go through that with a fine-tooth comb. Frankie Louvu had a media scrum. So did Deebo Samuel. We'll talk about those. And then Tyler Biadasz actually sat down at the podium yesterday as well. So we will talk about what he had to say. But before we get to any of that, episode 4 of season 4 of Commander's Log dropped yesterday. And as you probably already had an opportunity to do, you took a look. So did I. I told my wife at 7:01 yesterday, nobody disturbed me for the next 45 minutes. I did not know how long the episode was going to be. I knew it's going to be at least 30 minutes long. I told you guys if it was at least, I actually think I said 33, but I said if it's 30 minutes, I'll be okay. I'll be okay with that. Anything less than 30, I was going to be disappointed, but I was really hoping for 40 or 50 minutes. But then my wife made a great point yesterday. She said, they only had 5 draft picks, dude. And I was like, you know what? You're right. You know, if you want a longer episode, like last year, for instance, I think it was 52 or 54 minutes, it had 9 draft picks. So you had more, opportunities for them to pick up the phone, call someone. You've got more time in between picks in terms of like how many, how much footage they have, because they've got decisions to make. Should they trade back? Should they, trade up? Should they stay put? What's the decision-making process as to which player they're going to take if they have, multiple guys that they think are viable options at that particular selection. So that made a ton of sense. Like, okay, I get it now. So 33 minutes was probably right around what it should have been. Right? It didn't need to be any longer. So with that said, we'll go through this episode, the things that I found interesting, and then we'll get to some of the press conferences from yesterday. So first thing, right off the bat, we had options. To me, the first thing that I realized, because I watched it twice. So the first thing that I noticed was we had an opportunity to get out of our first pick. Right. And I thought that there would be opportunities at the back end of the first round. We had already talked about the fact that the Eagles wanted to move up and obviously they called. But there you heard DQ, or excuse me, you heard Adam Peters say to someone that he was on the phone with, we got a lot of calls, right? We got a lot of interested suitors for the selection. But they were really monitoring one guy in particular. And if they couldn't get out, they didn't like the compensation that they were getting, and they were forced to pick, and Connolly wasn't there, Amos was going to be their, fail safe, right? He was going to be their fallback plan. So they had a plan, obviously. But they could have gotten out of that 29th overall selection if they wanted to. So I think that's something that we kind of realized right off the bat, but we knew that already, but it was reinforced by watching this. The next thing is AP, he be busting balls, man. Chef P be busting balls, and I love it. Pause. When he's on the phone and he's talking to another GM, or he's talking to someone who is a part of another organization that's looking to do business. He's cool, he's calm, he's collected, but he's also not taking any shit. He's always in total control, right? He's always got a smile on his face, and he's like, and never overly demonstrative, right? Even when we saw the clip of Howie Roseman on the phone with him, we hadn't seen it from our vantage point. yet we had seen it from the Eagles' vantage point where Howie Roseman hangs up the phone and he says he's talking about an NFC East division tax, as if he wasn't the one to bring it up, right? Like, so this gave it context because he told us in the press conference, I don't remember what press conference it was, but someone had asked him about it, and he said, well, Howie was the one who did it to me first. He did it to me last year, right? So I was just, returning a favor essentially. And so he was like, a certain someone, I believe, told me last year that there was an in-division tax, and Howie wasn't trying to hear that. And then, Howie wants to play games, and AP's like, so who you taking? And he's like, I'm not telling you. He's like, dude, I'm not going to take the guy because you're going to take him. If I'm taking him, it's because we like him. Like, it's okay to tell me who the player is. It's not like I'm going to say, well, the Eagles are going to take this guy, so, let's take him here. We're taking this guy because we like him, not because you like him. And we don't want you to get him. But I get that, right? He didn't want to tell. So he's like, can you give me some initials? He was just, I love it, right? He's playing games like, well, what position does he play? So, hey, Chef P is a funny dude, man. But he's like, ultimately, we're going to stick and we're going to pick. And that's what we did. And how can you not love JCJ, right? They went through the whole spiel of him getting selected, the phone call, him flying in with his family, doing the press conference. And he's just such a really well-grounded kid that you just think is going to be, excellent in this league because he gets it. He's one of these guys that's continued to get better throughout his collegiate career, only going to get better. And you also just see the humility, how humble he is, how eager he is to win and learn. He's like, I'm coming here to win. Like, that's all it's about for him. So DQ had a card in his pocket with Josh Connolly Jr.'s name on it. He said he put it in his pocket at 5 a.m. And so, that was interesting. DQ was so excited about that card, right? Here was the funny part about how excited he was about that card, right? DQ would not stop talking about it. He slammed it down on the table. He showed everybody the name that was on the card. The guy was like, hey, what's in your other pockets? Like, in case there were other guys that they had to take, DQ might have pulled one out of his coat pocket. Like, yeah, I knew we were going to take this guy. He's like, what's in the other pockets? But I'll look. I'm a funny dude, right? Like, I notice everything, just like y'all do. Y'all don't miss shit. Sometimes y'all get on my damn nerves because y'all don't miss nothing. Well, y'all just like me. How can I be mad at someone that is just like me, right? Which is why we get along so well. So at the 7:55 mark of this video, DQ leaves some poor guy hanging, man. All he wants is some love, right? He's like, hey, great job, DQ. And he's trying to give him some love. He's trying to give him a fist pump, right? Trying to give him some pound. And DQ is so hung up on his goddamn card with Josh Connolly's name on it that he doesn't hear this poor guy over here begging for some love, man. Hey, DQ, great job. And DQ isn't trying to hear that shit because he's still talking about this damn card with Josh Connolly's name on it. Shit was hilarious. I felt so bad for the guy. And I'm like, why would they put that in the damn commander's log? Now, you couldn't see his face. So from that perspective, it's all good. We don't know who that guy is, right? But if I'm watching it and I'm that guy, I know that's me and I feel like shit, right? Because all I wanted was DQ to acknowledge me. Shit was hilarious. Anyway, I love how much AP relies on Lance Newmark. And also he gets input from guys like Brandon Sosna and his coordinators. He thanked Cliff. He calls him Cliffy for the Josh Connolly Jr. pick when he was thinking about picking between two guys at 61. He called over Joe Witt Jr. and kind of had him look at the screen like, hey, what do you think? I think he was going to take Trey Amos the entire time, but he was like asking him, what do you think about this pick? You know, these are the two guys we're thinking about, which one? And he's like, oh, I'm thinking about going with this guy. And you know, what is Joe Wick going to be like? Nah, don't pick him. Pick this guy, right? Yeah, it's like Kanye when Jay-Z told him, asked him, what do you think? He was like, I mean, shit, what I'm supposed to do? I'm on the train. I was like, yo, this shit's tight, right? Like, he didn't want Jay-Z to be rapping like that on that particular beat. He's like, I didn't want the introspective Jay-Z. You know, he said he just wanted some bullshit. And, you know, Jay-Z was rapping on some introspective shit, and Kanye was like, yeah, that's not what I envisioned when I made that beat, but what I'm going to say, right? I'm on the train, like, shit was tight, right? What the hell is Joe Wick Jr. going to say? Nah, don't pick him. You know, the time for that was a month ago when we sat in the war room and we were talking about these players, and I had you watch film on this guy, and we worked him out, XYZ, yada, yada, yada. At this point, Joey's like, yeah, draft him, right? So it's cool because Brandon Sosna comes over at a point during the second round and gives Chef P a note and also tells him, hey, they want you to move back 2 spots. And it was the Chiefs, right? And I love that Chef P called them the chefs. I love that as well, right? Love that. Because I call them the chefs all the time. So he's like, one of the options to move back, he was consulting with Lance Newmark, and Lance Newmark was like, nah, bro, that's like moving to Alaska. It's way too far. Can't do that, right? And so he got on the phone and he was like, nah, we ain't gonna do that. We gonna stick and pick. Is it our turn to pick? Yeah, it's our turn. We gonna stick and pick, bro. So I love that he takes in input from, and like, we're gonna miss him. I've already said that, but we're gonna miss Lance Newmark when he's no longer here, when he gets a job, because he's gonna be a GM at some point here in the near future. He had the interview with the Jets this past offseason. It's only a matter of time before he gets to be his own general manager. But I love the dynamic between those two. Anyway, Chef P then stands up and says to the room, first of all, let me make sure I say this because I meant to start it off by saying this. What an improvement for the draft room. My God, Josh Harris, stand up and take a mother effing bow. God damn it, man. Shit, you came in and in 1 year did what our last bullshit ass piece of shit owner couldn't do and refused to do in 30 years, which was upgrade the goddamn building, right? That draft room looks 1,000% better than any bullshit ass community center, you know, bingo hall shit we had before, right? So I just needed to, you know, bring that up. But he stood up and he said to everyone, we were prepared to take this young man at 29. And he was talking about Trey Amos. And, you know, the room, you know, exploded with applause. They make the phone call. I think this guy's going to be a dog for us. They were really excited. And you could tell because at the end of all of that, Lance Newmark is taking his jacket off and, you know, Chef P sitting down, and Lance Newmark takes a deep breath and he exhales and he's like, phew. He said, that was close, right? Like, they sweated out Josh Connolly in the first round. They sweated out Trey Amos in the second round, and they were exhausted. So then they cut to the National Harbor draft party. Quan and Revo were your 2 current players. Tana and Chris Thompson were among some former players there. Gary Clark was also there. So they did that whole spiel. And then they go back to the draft war room, right? Day 3 now, where the Commanders are on the clock in the 4th round. And again, much like in the second round where we had a ton of phone calls, we could have moved back. We saw the exchange between Brandon Sosna, Chef P, and Lance Newmark. In the 4th round, same deal. The phone's ringing. He's on the phone. He's talking to different teams. He could have gotten out of that 4th round pick if he wanted to. But again, they had a player earmarked at that position. and they had a vote, right? And it was funny because he told the last team that he was on the phone with, and that's why I love our GM, man, because he's got a personality, he's got a sense of humor, and again, I love to laugh. You know, that's my thing. And he said, "We gonna play, Steve." Right? Like he said, we're gonna stick here and we're gonna make a selection. And they was like, "You sure?" He was like, "We gonna play, Steve." I don't even know if the other person on the other end knew what the hell he was talking about. But that's a Family Feud reference. Steve Harvey, when somebody wins the little challenge and you have the option to defer to the other team, let them do it, or you can play it, and they be like, "We gonna play, Steve." He said, we gonna play, Steve." I said, that's my dog. That's my general manager, right? So what happens after that statement, "We gonna play, Steve," is one of the classic moments, legendary moments of Commander's log history. All right. At the 21:35 mark, our owner, who is the best in the National Football League, and again, that's subjective, right? But he's our guy, right? He's the guy that you feel like you can go out, have a drink with, a couple beers, a couple drinks, and you're just gonna have a blast with him. He's gonna kick it. He's gonna be himself. We've already seen him awkward handshakes lit at preseason games. He's our guy. He's sitting next to Chef P. As he hangs up the call, as he said, "Hey, we gonna play, Steve." He hangs up and he says, "Adam Peters." And DQ looks at him like, "Hell yeah, man." You know, DQ loves a good curse word, right? DQ looks at him and is like, "Hell yeah." And then DQ follows that up seamlessly with, "Let him cook." God, I love my staff, man. I love my owner. I love my GM. And I love my mother effing head coach. You name me a combo that would have done that so smoothly. "Hey, we gonna play, Steve." Followed by Adam effing Peters. Then the head coach says, "Let him cook." Let him cook. We don't call him Chef P for nothing. Let him cook. And cook he did, man. Took Jaylen Lane in the 4th round and told him, "You're a BMF." For those of you who don't know the name of the episode, Finding the Newest BMFs. Bad mother. If you didn't know what that meant. All right. Bad mother. So that was an all-timer in the Commander's Log series right there. That sequence at the 21:35 mark. Book it. I timestamped it for you. He said that they had 5 votes. With 5 votes in the Commander's caucus. I want to know who's in this damn Commander's caucus. This is like the 3rd time we've heard about the Commander's caucus. How many people are actually in this caucus? Is it 5? Is it 7? Is it 8? Is it 9? Is it 10? I'd love to know. You know, it's got to be really important voices. They don't always agree, but unanimously, if there's a guy that, and obviously Chef P has the last say so, but he said with 5 votes in the Commander's caucus, Jaylen Lane will be our selection, right? The best punt returner, a damn good slot receiver, will be our pick. I want to know how many people are in that Commander's caucus. Obviously, it's DQ, it's Adam Peters, it's I'm gonna guess Brandon Sosna is probably in there. Obviously, Lance Newmark is going to be in there. I don't know if Josh Harris is in there or not. Are the coaches, are your coordinators in there? Maybe not. I don't know. That would make it 7 if you just go off of those names that I just brought up. Maybe Sosna's not in there. Maybe he is. I don't know. If he's not, then that would take it down to 6. I don't know. That's a question that we'll never get the answer to, but I am curious as to know. Then we get to the 6th round pick, and K Medrano. And I didn't know this. You may have already known this. I didn't know this. So apparently he texted his former collegiate linebackers coach, Ken Norton, 5 minutes before the Commanders decided to make K Medrano the selection and his phone rung. He texted Ken Norton and said, "Coach, come and get me." You could tell he was absolutely elated to be reunited with Coach Ken Norton. And like he said, he didn't really have a team that he wanted to be. I mean, he was a late round pick. At this point, he just wanted to be drafted into the NFL. He really didn't care where, but if he had a preference, he wanted to be reunited with Ken Norton Jr. They had been through a lot together. And remember, Medrano was an offensive player, a receiver that made the transition over to linebacker. So those formative years with Ken Norton, where he was first making that transition, were huge for him. And I'm pretty sure they had a lot of conversations about, the position and, what it would be like if, he was able to put it together and potentially making it to the NFL. And, some of those conversations definitely hit home with him. And he was so happy, like, that he was being reunited with Ken Norton. It was really cool to see. So I thought that was pretty cool that he texted him. He said he texted Coach Norton at 2:51, and the call came through with the Commanders at 2:55 that they were going to select him. So, that got him a little choked up, you could tell. So Coach Lynn, as we get to the 7th round pick in our 5th and final selection of Ja'Cory Crosskey-Merritt, Coach Lynn was a lot like all of us, right? He needed answers on this Bill shit. He was like, "The hell is going on with this Bill shit? Like, why do they call him Bill? Did he want his name to be Bill or something?" And DQ was like, "I think it's a nickname that just stuck." And he was like, "I've been calling him Ja'Cory this whole time." And so he was confused. He's like, "Yo, we got to get this Bill shit straightened out when you get here." He needed answers. So did we. Remember when we first heard that they called him Bill? When Adam Peters told us that his nickname is Bill, we were like, "What? Bill? Okay." Or either it was Adam Peters or Lance Newmark who told us his nickname was Bill. I think it might have been Lance Newmark because he was the one that talked at the end of the draft when the dust settled and the smoke cleared. And we were like, "Bill, what the hell?" So, everybody, the internet is undefeated and it's full of detectives. Everybody went out there, found video, and boom, we found out pretty quickly that, it was a nickname, Lil Bill, and it stuck. So Coach Lynn needed answers. So did we, right? And then Dustin Reagan, I'm assuming, is a scout. But we don't know his standing within the organization. But my guess is he's a scout. And he must have been ranting and raving to his wife about Bill. And his wife was like, "Bro, you been talking me to death about this Bill guy. Y'all better take him." And his wife said to him, "Bill, no matter what." And so that was crazy to hear. Like, his wife was like, "No matter what, bro. Bill, no matter what. Y'all got to take him." And that they did. And I think he has a chance to be just spectacular in this league. I think we got us a serious steal in the 7th round. And he just kept saying, "Y'all got y'all one. Y'all got one. I'm coming. Y'all got one." Right? Yeah. So it was funny when he told his family to make some noise, and then the Commanders were making noise in the war room. It said at the bottom of the screen, "Excited Commanders noise." I thought that was really pretty funny. And so that was the end of episode 4 of season 4 finding the newest BMFs. If I left something out that you thought was interesting, important, or otherwise, leave it down in the comment section, and I would love to see what you're referencing. So really good episode. It did what it was supposed to do. It satisfied my itch. It scratched that itch that I had for a Commander's Log episode. Again, I would have preferred it be longer, but as my wife so eloquently put it, bro, they only had 5 picks. Touche. So, good shit. Loved it. You tell me what you thought about it. Leave it down in the comment section. So, let's go through the pressers and the scrums, the media scrums yesterday. I'll save DQ's presser for last. So we'll go through these media scrums quickly. Then we'll go through Tyler Biadasz, who had an actual formal press conference along with DQ. We already hit Cliff yesterday, so we got that one out of the way, and Jaylen as well. So we heard from Deebo Samuel. He talked about Jayden Daniels, and he said that he can make every throw. He's cool. He's calm. He's collected. He said, I was able to see that last year watching him from afar, and then just being around him, you just sense his aura and you know, how this guy is able to operate at such a high level. And he was cheesing when he was talking about Jayden, because I mean, imagine coming from playing with Brock Purdy to Jayden Daniels, right? I mean, no disrespect to Brock Purdy, but he ain't Jayden Daniels, right? So he talked about the brotherhood. He was like, yo, I feel the brotherhood. Like, I came in, they embraced me, opened their arms, welcomed me into the locker room. You know, the staff is great. The players have been phenomenal. I just, you know, I feel the brotherhood here. He talked about Cliff Kingsbury, called him an offensive genius and a guy that, you know, he really loves because he feels like he's going to put him in positions to succeed. And that's the thing that we love about Cliff, is he does a great job of taking the parts that he has and maximizing them. He got the most out of Olamide Zaccheaus. He got the most out of De'Ami Brown last year. He got the most out of the guys that were here last year. You know, it wasn't the best parts to have, but he took those parts and he got the most out of them. And he's going to absolutely maximize a guy like Deebo Samuel. So he talked about Cliff and you know, just saying that he treats everybody the same. It demands excellence and perfection, and you know, he's with that. He talked about his relationship with Terry McLaurin. He's like, yo, I get it, it's a business. So you know, I applaud him for getting, you know, doing what he feels like he needs to do. But you know, we push each other. When he was here, we were pushing each other, and when he gets back, that's what we're going to continue to do. He talked about getting into shape. Like, you know, this time of the offseason is really good for him to get in shape. He's come up with a plan with the staff, right? The nutrition staff and the weight training staff to get into shape. And he's like, I'm sticking to that. And we've been going through it, the regimen, and we're going to continue to do that to put me in the best shape. And I think he's going to be in phenomenal shape, and he's going to kill it this year. Then he talked about his relationship with AP, because there was a video that was circulating with him and AP chopping it up at practice. And he laughed, did Deebo, because he, you know, it's in those moments where you realize, hey, they don't miss shit, right? Because here you are minding your business at practice. You run past the general manager, who is a guy you're very familiar with from your days in San Francisco. So y'all start kicking it and talking and laughing and chumming it up. And they see all of that, and they ask you about it, and you're like, God damn, all these dudes out here at practice running around, and y'all somehow find a way to see me talking to the general manager, but they're not going to miss that. Somebody's always watching, right? So he just talked about, you know, their relationship dating all the way back to San Francisco, how excited he was when he knew he was going to Washington because of his relationship with Adam Peters. And he's like, it's off to a great start here in Washington. They had a media scrum with Oos. And he talked about the purpose of OTAs, and he was like, man, this is an opportunity for us to get better, you know, for us to continue to build the culture, to, you know, reunite the brotherhood, make it stronger. And it's also an opportunity for us to work out some of the kinks, you know. He said, by no means is it perfect out here, but this is why we out here to iron out those wrinkles and get better, right? Then he talked about the tush push. It was brief. He was like, look, man, I'm standing on business. I said what I said, but ultimately we just got to stop it. It is what it is, right? He was asked about how last year motivates him. And he was like, look, we can't change last year. It definitely motivates us, but last year's in the past and now it's a new season. And we got to try to prepare to put ourselves back in that position and change the outcome. And that's the right answer, right? Like last year is last year. You know, we've been living off of last year's memories, and, you know, those are core memories, right? And they'll never go away. But as we've talked about in past years, and I know I used to talk about this all the time, we need to make new memories, right? Unlock new core memories. That's what they're trying to do, and that's what Oos was talking about, right? And he talked about playing with B-Wags again, because remember, B-Wags was on a 1-year deal. There was no guarantee he'd be back. We knew he was coming back, but they did bring him back, and he said, man, you guys got 19 years of experience. That's a little jokey joke, in case y'all didn't catch that. So and he was laughing when he said it. I'm pretty sure they'd be making fun of B-Wag's age, but at the same time, they respect him for having that kind of longevity in the game, because it's not many guys that play as long as a guy like Bobby Wagner has. So, and at the level that he's still playing at. So he talked about how much easier, you know, B-Wags makes the game for him. And he also talked about some of the guys that they have in front of them. He's like, you know, building continuity with them. He's like, obviously, you know, we're not in pads yet. We're not going against the offense like that yet. But, you know, having guys like, and he singled out Javon Kinlaw because he's a big dude. We talked about that yesterday. In front of them is going to help them better with their fits, and, you know, giving them an opportunity to maybe run unabated to the running back, quarterback, et cetera, et cetera. So he talked about AP, trusting AP and the guys that they brought in that he thinks are going to help. And that kind of ties into the last question he was asked about, which was, how did he feel they're going to be able to stop the run this year? And he's like, well, it's hard to tell right now. You know, we don't have pads on. You know, we're not really seeing anything from a standpoint of the changes that have been made, because you got to actually physically go out and execute those things. But he's like, we really like the guys that they brought in just from a physicality standpoint, off of their build and what they look like and their movement skills. They look like they're going to help, but obviously you won't really know until you get into some live action, right? So that was Oos, right? Then Tyler Biadasz had a press conference, and a lot of it centered around him being a leader on this offensive line. It started out with him being a leader amongst new faces. What does that look like for him? So he talked about that. And it kind of ties into this next one. So it kind of encompasses the first two questions, kind of rolled into one. Elevating the play of everyone around him was the next thing he talked about. And that's pretty significant, because when you have as many new faces in the shuffling of the offensive line as we're going to have. So you've already got two new guys on the offensive line. And Laramie Tunsil at left tackle, and potentially Josh Connolly Jr. at right tackle. And then that means Coleman is going to shift to either left or right guard. We're assuming left guard. And that's going to put someone else at right guard until Sam Cosmi is healthy. So in effect, Biadasz is going to be working with two new linemen in particular, but all four of the other positions will be occupied by someone who did not play that position here for the Commanders last season. So in effect, he will be the only guy playing the same position from a year ago on the offensive line, right? Because Coleman, who was your left tackle, was probably going to be your left guard. And Wiley, who was your right tackle last year, probably going to be your right guard until Sam Cosmi returns to the lineup. So he's going to have to learn two different guys, right? Because the center, it's important for him. And he talked about this a lot from, you know, a continuity standpoint, combo block standpoint, you know, understanding how this guy works so you can work off of him, and vice versa. it's important to get these reps in now, which is when you hear him talk about that, and he talked about the brotherhood and specifically with the offensive line, he's like, our brotherhood is even tighter because we have to work together as a unit. You know, other positions, they have individual jobs. So do we, but we also have to work together in unison. It's synchronized. And so we all got to be on the same page, and you got to be able to work, you know, because Biadasz is going to be playing center, but what happens if there's moving parts, right? Like he said last year, I missed some games, and Michael Dieter had to step in. Cosmi went out. Trent Scott had to step in the playoff game. Wiley got injured. Trent Scott had to step in at tackle. So you had moving parts last year at different times of the season. And so he's like, hey, you got to be ready for all of that. And this is a time where you start to gel and mesh and build that bond on the offensive line. And when as he's talking, I'm thinking about Laramie Tunsil and like, bro, you should be here, right? It sucks that he's not, but you know, you should be here, especially when you're on a new team. But it is what it is. And that was the next thing he talked about, the importance of this time and what it can be used for. So and then he talked about going back home to Green Bay, right? Remember, he's from Wisconsin. That's where he plays football, his college football at. And so that's where his family is. And you can see that big ass smile come on his face when they talked about that week 2 matchup against Green Bay on a Thursday night. He knew it was a Thursday night game and everything. He kind of had it circled on the calendar, like, yeah, we're going home. But he's like, look, there's a lot of things that have to transpire between then and now. I'm just focused on day 2 of phase 3 of OTAs, worried about training camp. We got a lot of things to get to, but you know, when we get there, it'll be special. It's always good to see family. And he's like, I just want to win. All right. So that was Tyler Biadasz. Now let's get to DQ. So DQ's presser, always love hearing from DQ first and foremost. He usually is a straight shooter, gives it to you straight, no chaser. And it's a lot of good shit, not a lot of filler. It's a lot of good, hearty, nutritional information, not a lot of empty calories when DQ speaks. So this was a lot more of that, right? He mentioned remember yesterday I mentioned B Mitch at practice, and I said, I love seeing that shit. You know, we had so many resources in the past with players that have done it at a high level that were here that we just didn't tap into. You know, for many years, Chris Cooley was working, you know, in the radio booth, and he was working with Kevin Sheehan, and he was doing all kinds of radio stuff, and he was right there, and they could have had him out at practice working with the tight ends just once or twice. Like it wasn't going to hurt anything, and they never took advantage of that, right? All these resources just sitting around, and you know, over the years, I'm like, why isn't B Mitch out there a little bit, helping these guys, schooling them? And B Mitch doesn't mind doing it, and I mentioned that I loved seeing that yesterday before I even heard DQ speak. And one of the first things he said at this press conference was he went to B Mitch in the winter and was like, yo, would you mind coming out to the OTAs and, you know, maybe having a practice or two where you just help the young guys with punt returning? And, you know, B Mitch is like, yeah, no, I definitely, I'll pull up. And sure enough, he pulled up, and you could see, and I talked about it yesterday, him talking to Jaylen Lane, and he said, man, B Mitch is a real one. Like, never returned kicks a day in his life until he got to the NFL and had to figure it out, and ended up being, you know, one of the most prolific kickoff return, punt return specialists in NFL history. He's like, pretty much, and you know, DQ's slang, he's a dog-ass competitor, pretty much. Then he was asked something that I was really interested to see how DQ would answer it. What was his approach to OTA attendance, right? And he's like, you know, one shoe doesn't fit all, right? One size doesn't fit all of these guys. And then he just took a sharp turn and detour away from that question altogether and started talking about the coaches and how they got to get better, and the attendance from them, and how he's in communication with all the guys, but he didn't denounce not showing up, and that, like, those type of questions, they're easy to answer, but it's also easy to F the answer up, because you don't want to put your foot in your mouth. And a question like that, Ron would have put his foot in his mouth. Like, yeah, we would love for everyone to be here. And, we talked to some of those guys, and, and then Ron would then put, like, hey, they'll be here such and such. And then when they don't show up, now he looks like an idiot, right? You just say, you know what? It's optional. DQ pretty much said, look, this isn't one size fits all, right? To each its own. Translation, we would love everyone to be here, but it's not mandatory. And as long as everybody's doing what they need to do off on their own, they're not out there bullshitting. And when they show up, they're in shape and they ready to rock and roll, we good. We Gucci, right? He talked about Jaylen's approach. And he's like, and this shit right here, this is why I am not worried in the slightest about a step back from Jaylen Daniels this year. Because you keep hearing about his approach to the game. You keep hearing about the amount of work that he puts in. You keep hearing about him showing up early. He's the same guy he was last year as a rookie. That hasn't changed one iota. He's the same Jaylen Daniels that was showing up at 5 o'clock in the morning. Tyler Biadasz said of Jaylen, man, he been getting in the weight room. He's definitely bigger, right? His frame is bigger. He's been in the weight room putting in the work. And Tyler Biadasz says, man, he gets to the building early, and he started cheesing like way earlier than I get here. Like, Biadasz, like, I ain't even tripping. I know what it is. I ain't getting here that early. Like, that's his approach. That's his thing, is he's going to put in the work. And DQ said, man, that's one thing we appreciate about Jaylen. It's the shit that y'all don't see, the behind the scenes work ethic that this guy puts in to be better. And, he said, we really appreciate that around here. We appreciate it as fans too, right? Because that's what instills confidence in us, that everybody that is preying on this man's downfall in his second season, it ain't happening, bro. It just ain't happening. Because he's going to over prepare. He's going to be ready. He's not resting on the success of year one. He's trying to figure out, how can I be better in year two? That's how you get better. That's how you get better results. That's why I'm not worried about Jaylen Daniels. DQ talked about adjustments that are going to be made to Jaylen and how they're going to counteract those. And he's like, look, they ain't seen Cliff's entire playbook. We just scratching the surface with what we can do there. Like, now that you got an offensive line that you trust, Cliff kind of, talked about that yesterday. Like, we got more in the bag, bro. We can get to more stuff. And then he said, we also brought guys in here that add different wrinkles and different elements. There was no Deebo Samuel on this offense last year. This offensive line wasn't as good as it was last year. Or this offensive line is better than it was a season ago. And, Ja'Cory Crosby-Merritt is here, and Luke McCaffrey's going in year two, and Noah Brown is back, but not in a number 2 wide receiver role, right? Jalen Lane's now here. That's another piece. Like, it's different things that you now have to concern yourself with from an offensive standpoint, or defensively, if you're trying to stop the Commanders. So he's like, yeah, no, we got new players, new guys that we can add into the mix. And then we still got a lot more of the playbook to get to that they haven't even seen yet. So we're good. It's essentially what he was saying. We're good over here. We're not worried. This was the first time that we heard about Sam Cosmi. There was an update. I appreciate JP Finley for asking about Sam Cosmi. And DQ says he's doing well. He's attacking the process the way we expected Sam to attack it, right? And he said, we're not going to, and just like he always does with guys that get injured or rookies that are coming, we're not going to miss a step, right? We're not going to miss a step in this process. And he's like, Sam's checking all the boxes, hitting all his markers. And he's doing really well. So that's what we want to hear. In my mind, I told y'all that until he's not ready for the opening game, he's going to be ready for the opening. He's not going to be ready for the opening game. In my mind, an ACL is a 6-month injury, right? For like most people. He's an offensive lineman. I'm going to say it's going to take him 9 months. You treat it like it's an Achilles instead of an ACL. If you look at the 9-month time frame, that puts you in October. So I think he's going to miss the first 6 weeks of the season or so. And then they got to ramp him back up. So yeah, I think sometime in mid-October is when Sam Cosmi will be ready to come back. So that would probably put you in that week 6. I think his first game of the season coming back might be the Cowboys game in week 7. That, to me, is the target date for Sam Cosmi to return to the lineup. Week 7 against the Cowboys. So we'll see how that all works itself out. DQ was asked about his involvement in contracts. They were essentially asking about Terry without asking about Terry and his relationship with Adam Peters. And he talked about the dynamic between the two. He was like, hey, DQ keeps me informed of what's going on with some of those contractual situations. I'm not necessarily chiming in as much as he's just letting me know where we are in the process. Hey, give you an example. Hey, reached out to Terry's representatives today. We made a little bit of progress. We're getting closer to getting the deal done, but we're still a little ways apart. Cool. All right. So I know where y'all are. So when he talks to Terry on the phone, he can say, hey man, we're going to get this thing done. You just continue to keep working and we're going to get you back in here. Right. So, and then he says, they go through practice and they're doing things, and then he informs AP of some of the things that they're going through in practice, how certain guys look and how they fit or don't fit. Like last year, for instance, with Jahan Dotson, that was probably DQ telling him, hey, this dude right here, he ain't what we looking for at the receiver position. If you can get something for him, get something for him, right? Probably told him the same thing with John Ridgeway. Had him in Dallas, know what he is, know what he ain't. He ain't what we looking for here. If you can get something for him, get something for him, right? So he talked about that relationship. He's like, we always are in constant communication with one another. Again, love what they have going on from a relationship standpoint. It's what we've always wanted. One of these head coach, general manager relationships where they're tied at the hip. Those are the guys that are most successful in the league. Those are the teams that are most successful in the league. He was asked about Tyler Biadasz in particular on the offensive line and like his veteran leadership with all the moving parts on the offensive line. And he took that opportunity to talk about depth and competition. And then he kind of circled back around and closed it with Tyler Biadasz talk. But he was like, yeah, man, we really love Tyler Biadasz and we love the depth that we've created on this team. And he's not wrong, especially on the offensive line. And he said that depth breeds competition, which we love. And we're going to put the best guys out on the field. And then he circled back to Tyler Biadasz and closed that one out. So it really was more about the depth there. And I love that conversation because we've talked about the depth on this team and how we think it has been vastly improved this season and how we've gotten stronger in a number of areas. Offensive line, defensive backfield, corner in particular. Defensive line is deeper and probably better than it was a season ago as well, right? Running back position has been upgraded a bit. So you love to see it, right? He was asked about Dietrich Wise, and he was like, man, Dietrich Wise came with strong recommendations. So did Jonathan Jones, both from the New England Patriots. He said that Dietrich fits in here really well. He's square. That's one of DQ's favorite things to talk about with guys in the trenches is playing square, right? And he's like, he's stout at the point of attack. He does the things that, we like in a defensive lineman. He's really good against the run, and he's going to fit in here really, really well. He's a good dude too, which, is a big thing for DQ. Like before we talk about the football player, you as a man have to be a good dude, or you're probably not going to survive here in Washington, right? Which is why until they actually take a guy that has character concerns, I just don't buy it, because it's so important. DQ constantly talks about wanting to know a guy's story, wanting to know his background. That's important to him, getting to know the player. And it is important because if you can make someone on a personal human level respect you and feel like, damn, that dude cares about me. He doesn't just care about what I can do for him as a defensive end, as a corner, or as a safety. He cares about me, the person. He cares about my family, cares about my wife and my kids and my mom and my dad. Then you can get more out of that guy. So he talked about Dietrich Wise being, the type of guy that's going to fit into this locker room and fit in on the field very well. And then he talked about retaining the coaching staff. And that was what he started the press conference out with, but he really elaborated on it here when he was asked about it. He talked about the phrase, the ecosystem, which he says is a Adam Peters phrase, that they've created an ecosystem in Washington where they've kind of insulated themselves, created an environment where people want to come to work, where it's a great place to be, where everyone respects each other, and you can have a good time, but you can also work hard and demand that others work hard. And again, that's why this team was so successful last year. It wasn't because we were super talented. We were successful last year because we were well coached. We had Jaylen Daniels, and those players believed in one another, and they believed in the staff and the coaching that they were receiving, right? There was a true brotherhood, and DQ talked about the culture aspect is everybody believing in the same thing, moving in the same way, right? So then you get to staying in touch with players. He's like, yeah, no. I stay in touch with these players year round. Like, season's over, I'm calling Jaylen Daniels and checking in on them, right? Season's done, I'm checking on Bobby Wagner, which is why he could say Bobby Wagner's somewhere getting better today, right? Because he's in constant communication with these guys. And he said that's no different with, the guys that aren't at OTAs right now. I'm in constant communication with those guys. I know what's going on with them. And I feel pretty good about what those guys are doing. And he said especially Terry, right? Because there's a real relationship there. The other two, they just got here. He was with Terry all year last year, so he knows Terry intimately. And so he's definitely, and Terry was there early in OTAs too, right? He was there for phase 1 and basically all of phase 2 as well. This is something that's important in DQ. He talked about, talking to veteran players and learning what's best for them, right? So, for example, he said he went up to Deebo Samuel and asked him, hey, what's a route that you love to run? Is there something that you're not running right now that you haven't seen in the playbook that is something that is really good for you? You feel like you do that better than anybody else? And Deebo was like, nah, not really. He said, well, if that does arise, if you feel like, man, I'm not running enough of these, I killed on these. Like, for instance, it's shallow crosses in every NFL playbook. It's in every offense. It doesn't matter if it's college, high school, NFL, UFL. Shallow cross exists in playbooks. Deebo runs a mean shallow cross, right? Because you just want to get it in his hands and then he can get up the field and be a problem. If you weren't running dig routes and shallow crosses, which are specialties of Deebo Samuel, if you weren't running those two routes in particular, maybe even throwing a slant, you aren't running those play. That's not going to play into the strength of Deebo Samuel because those routes are where he excels. So if we weren't running enough of one of those, Deebo could go to him and say, hey, I really think I should be running a little bit more dig routes or a little bit more shallow crosses. DQ says, hey, when you figure out if there's something that we not doing enough of that you think you excel at, let us know. Let me know, right? And he said, I'm more inclined to do that with a veteran, right? He says, with rookies, I'll do that from time to time, but for the most part, I'm just trying to make sure that rookies are up to speed on what's going on and they're getting acclimated. With veterans, they've been around the block. They know what's going on. And he says, more importantly, they know their bodies and they know themselves. They know what they can and can't do. They know, because they've spun the block a couple times. So you can talk to them and they'll tell you, hey, I fare better when I play, as a non-tech, right? If I line up as a non-tech. Okay, maybe we'll let you do that a couple times, right? Not necessarily what we do here, but if you feel more comfortable doing that in some obvious passive situations, we'll turn you loose from a non-tech, right? So he said talking to vets is important for him. And also getting, the backstory, the background on those guys. These are things that DQ really cares about. And then in hearing all of this, DQ talked about being detailed. And that was one of the things that I think I was very fascinated with last year, was just how detailed DQ was, how detailed he had his coaches be, being detail oriented as DQ is. And I think that also comes from experience. I don't think he was as detailed in his first opportunity with the Falcons as he is now. And that's another reason why hiring a guy who's already been a head coach once in this league and giving him that second opportunity isn't necessarily the worst thing in the world, because you've learned from some of your mistakes. And one of the things DQ talked about last year a lot was being more detail oriented. And he kind of regurgitated that. And that's really benefited us a ton, even down to the practices. See, like he used an example, like, they did 7-on-7 and they did some indie drills. He's like, we're gonna ramp up. Some teams jump out there and they're doing everything in day one. He's like, that's not us. Come out. He said, but the practice was so smooth and the guys played so hard that you wouldn't have known that this was the first real practice of the offseason. So, and then I love the clothes, just like his clothes at Salisbury University, which, was making its rounds on social media. His close of this press conference was classic DQ. So there's a question being asked, and I forget the reporter, but he usually asks a lot of stupid ass questions that I'm not necessarily the biggest fan of. But Scott Abraham, that's his name. Scott Abraham is asking him, and this wasn't a bad question by Scott. I knew, and DQ knew where he was going. You knew when you heard it where he was going, and it's a real question, right? Like last year, we were under the radar. There were no expectations. I think the number for us was either 6.5 or 6. Set from Vegas in terms of win total. And there were no expectations. We weren't supposed to be a playoff team, let alone, in the NFC Championship game. But, we defied the odds and we snuck up on some teams last year, right? Who are we kidding? We snuck up on some teams that were unassuming, didn't expect us to put up much of a fight. Cincinnati didn't expect us to go into their building and smack them around and put up 38 points. They didn't expect that. But we were under the radar. That's not happening this year. We're not sneaking up on anybody. And so Scott Abraham was like, last year you were the hunter. This year, and before he could even get the hunted out, DQ cut his ass off and was like, we're hunters. We're hunters. We're always hunters. I love it. Love that shit. That's a mindset, DQ said. And that you damn right that's a goddamn mindset. You damn right that's a mindset. Don't even come here with that hunted bullshit. We are always hunters. Don't you forget about it. So you don't got to ask me this shit again about being the hunted. We are always hunters. He's like, we always got something to prove. And he's right. Even the Philadelphia Eagles, who won the Super Bowl, they got something to prove. Can we do it again? We lost, we lost one of our coordinators and, one of our key members of our secondary and one of our defensive linemen. We lost all these pieces. No more Darius. Can we do it again? They got some shit to prove. So you can convince your team that you're a hunter even when they won it all. And DQ's like, we're always the hunter. Always the hunter. Yeah, we won 12 games last year. Yeah, we're in the NFC Championship game. Yeah, people expect things from us, but we still got shit to prove. And we got to go out there and get it. And guess what? Everybody starts at the bottom at 0-0. So we got to go out here. And my favorite animal is the lion. And as big as the lion is, and as ferocious as he is, and as respected as that lion is in the jungle, He's always the hunter. Despite being pretty high on the damn food chain, always the hunter. Never, ever looked at as the hunted. Even when a pack of hyenas come and they looking for food, try that line if you want to. You might mess around and one of y'all might not come out alive. 3 of y'all came in there thinking y'all was going to gang up on this man. One of y'all left with him, with your neck broke in this man's mouth. The other 2 ran the hell off, right? Never the hunted. Always. All caps, the hunter. I love that shit from DQ. So that's how he ended the press conference. Classic DQ. So that, my friends, is cleaning up all of the pressers and scrums from yesterday and also diving into Commander's Log episode 4 from season 4. If you haven't already done so, do me a huge favor. Hit the like button. Over 250 of you out there, only 85 likes. We can get that number to 100. All right. So please do me a huge solid and hit the like button if you haven't already done it. Tonight, Commanders Kings will ride again. I'm gonna think we're gonna set that at 8:45 tonight, just to give everybody time to get where they need to be. But we will be live. We will be talking about OTAs. We'll be talking about some noticeable absences from OTAs, among other topics. And we'll talk about some other things that have come up about the Commanders. So be sure to tune in to that. We'll probably discuss episode 4 of Commander's Log. My guess is Rio and myself watched it, and Ed and Rico probably did it, but we'll still discuss it anyhow. But in any event, I digress. That's going to do it for me, your man Louie T, here on the Command Post Live. You know what it is. Post up. Take command. I look forward to chopping it up with you guys a little bit later on this evening. Until then, you guys take care. Have a good one. Peace.